Welcome to HFY Galaxy Tales. Make sure you like the story and subscribe this channel. Listen, I've been doing this job for 17 cycles now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Evaluating species for potential inclusion in the Galactic Council isn't exactly thrilling work, but it pays well and the benefits package includes premium health coverage across 400 star systems. So when Assignment Director Voth handed me the file on Sol 3, also known as Earth, I figured it'd be another routine assessment. File the paperwork, assign a mediocre rating, move on to the next planet full of hopeful primitives. Oh, how spectacularly wrong I was. The assessment team consisted of myself, Kral of the Venethi Empire, along with 3 other evaluators. There was Plix, a Garathian who never stopped bragging about his 17 doctorates. Seriously, 17. He found ways to mention it in every conversation. Then we had Serix, a methodical Quilvan who treated every interaction like a mathematical equation. And finally, Morwen, a Talhax representative who'd been doing evaluations since before I was hatched and acted like she'd invented the entire process. We arrived at Earth's orbit on a Tuesday. Why do I remember it was Tuesday? Because that's what the humans called it, and it became relevant later in ways that still make my primary brain hurt. Our standard protocol involved sending down a diplomatic probe to establish first contact with whatever governing body claimed authority over the planet. Earth, as it turned out, had about 200 of those. Nations, they called them. All crammed onto one smallish planet, all convinced they were the center of the universe. The irony wasn't lost on me. After sorting through the political mess, we established contact with something called the United Nations. They were delighted, predictably. Most species are when they realize they're not alone in the cosmos. They assembled their best and brightest for our evaluation, rolling out what they clearly considered their most impressive achievements. This is where it gets interesting. The first presentation took place in a city called New York. Massive structures of metal and glass reached toward the sky, which was admittedly impressive for a species that had only recently figured out heavier than air flight. Our team materialized in their General Assembly Hall, and you should have seen their faces. Priceless. Absolutely priceless. A human named Marcus Kellerman led the presentation. Tall, confident, wearing what humans call a suit. He smiled a lot. Too much, honestly. It activated my prey response. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, Marcus began, his voice booming through translation devices, we are thrilled to present humanity's greatest achievements for your consideration. What followed was 2 hours of the most painfully obvious showboating I'd witnessed in my career. They showed us their space station, which was cute in a look what the children built sort of way. They demonstrated their communications technology, which was functional but about 400 years behind standard galactic protocols. They played us something called classical music, which, fine, was actually pleasant, but hardly groundbreaking when 17,000 species across the galaxy have independently developed similar harmonic systems. Morwen kept making notes on her datapad, her facial tendrils twitching with what I recognized as suppressed amusement. Plix audibly yawned 3 times. Serix calculated something on his personal device and looked even more bored than usual, which I hadn't thought possible. But here's the thing. There was one human in that assembly hall who wasn't part of the presentation team. She sat in the back, wearing considerably less formal attire than the others. Jeans and a sweater, I later learned. Her name tag read Dr. Vera Park, Observational Consultant. While everyone else watched us with a mixture of awe and desperation to impress, she watched us with something else entirely. Clinical interest. Like she was studying us. Taking notes, occasionally nodding to herself, sometimes suppressing what looked like a smile. It should have been my first clue. The presentation concluded with a display of human art, literature, and philosophy. Marcus gestured grandly at projections of paintings, scrolling text from famous works, quotes from their greatest thinkers. And so, Marcus finished, spreading his arms wide, we hope you'll find humanity worthy of joining the greater galactic community. Plix stood first, his crystalline form refracting the overhead lights. Preliminary assessment suggests a rating of 4.2 on the standard civilization scale. Adequate for monitoring status, insufficient for membership consideration. Marcus's smile faltered. 4.2. Out of what? 10, Morwen said flatly. We use a 10-point scale. You're slightly below average. You could have heard a pin drop in that hall. The assembled human dignitaries looked like they'd been slapped. Their faces went through this fascinating color change, from normal flesh tone to red to almost purple. Below average? Another human, a woman named Ambassador Wright, stood up shakily. How, we showed you our greatest, our technology, our culture, our... Your technology is primitive, Sarix interrupted, his voice carrying no malice, just statement of fact. Your political systems are fractured and inefficient. Your resource management is catastrophic. Your species still engages in regular armed conflict with itself. You pollute your own habitat. You have barely left your home planet. By any objective measure, you are developmentally delayed compared to the galactic standard. I watched that Dr. Park woman in the back. While everyone else looked devastated, she was writing something down. Still taking notes. Still observing. Still smiling slightly. Marcus tried to recover. But surely our art, our music, our capacity for emotion and creativity. Present in 97% of all evaluated species, Plick said, examining his tentacles with apparent fascination. Not unique. Not special. Common. The meeting ended shortly after. The humans were too shell-shocked to continue, and honestly, we had 17 more worlds to evaluate this quarter. Can't spend all day coddling every species that thinks they're exceptional. As we prepared to return to our ship, I noticed Dr. Park approaching. Unlike the others, who were either crying or arguing amongst themselves, she walked with purpose. Confident. Deliberate. Excuse me, she said, addressing our group. Before you go, I was wondering if I could ask a few questions. For my research. Morwen waved a dismissive tendril. We don't typically engage in extended dialogue with evaluated species. The assessment is complete. Oh, I understand, Vera said, and there was something in her tone. Something that made my secondary brain perk up with attention. I'm just curious about your evaluation criteria. You see, I'm an anthropologist, and I study how different groups assess value and worth. It's fascinating, really. Our criteria are standardized across the Council, Sarix said. Objective measurements of technological advancement, social cohesion, resource management, and cultural sophistication. Right, Vera nodded, still smiling that small smile. And how many species are currently in the Council? 4,612, I answered without thinking. Interesting. And how many have you evaluated total? Plix made a sound like escaping gas, which in Garathian indicates irritation. Approximately 48,000 over the last 3,000 standard years. So about a 10% acceptance rate, Vera said, not asking, just stating. That's quite selective. Tell me, of the species you've accepted, how many were rated below 5 initially? Silence. We looked at each other. None, Morwen finally said. Below 5 indicates insufficient development. But you do follow-up evaluations, correct? Check on species to see if they've progressed. Every 50 standard years for monitored species, I confirmed. Vera's smile widened slightly. And how many species that you initially rated below 5 have ever improved enough to gain membership in subsequent evaluations? More silence. Longer this time. I don't have those statistics readily available, Plick said, his voice tight. I do, Vera said pleasantly. I accessed your public council records while you were giving your assessment. The answer is 0. Not a single species rated below 5 has ever been re-evaluated and accepted. In fact, Most species rated below 6 never receive a second evaluation. You mark them as monitored and then functionally forget about them. Your point. Morwen's tendrils were no longer amused. They'd gone rigid. No point, Vera said, shrugging. Just collecting data. One more question though. Your own species, when they were first evaluated, what were their ratings? I felt my dorsal plate start to retract. Oh no. That information is. Cerex began. The Venethi Empire was rated 8.1, Vera said, looking at me. The Garathian Collective, 7.9. Quilvan Unity, 8.4. Talhax Dominion, 8.7. All significantly above your threshold for acceptance. Almost like the system was designed by species that score high to identify other species that score high according to their specific values. That's how standards work, Plick snapped. Advanced civilizations define what advancement means. Absolutely, Vera agreed. And I'm sure you're all very advanced. I was particularly impressed by your faster-than-light travel capabilities. Truly remarkable. Though I noticed your ships still require 3 weeks to travel between star systems. We've had some physicists working on a theoretical framework that might reduce that to 3 days, but, well, we're only a 4.2 civilization. Probably nothing to it. Every single one of us froze. You have theoretical FTL improvements? I asked carefully. Oh, several teams working on various approaches, Vera said casually. There's also a group at MIT, that's a research institution, working on what they call quantum entanglement communication. Instantaneous information transfer across any distance. Again, purely theoretical. We're quite primitive, after all. Instantaneous communication is. Morwen started, then stopped. That's considered theoretically impossible. By your physicists, yes, Vera said. Our physicists have different theories. But we're probably wrong. We score very low on cultural sophistication, as you noted. She glanced at her watch, an actual mechanical timepiece on her wrist. Charmingly anachronistic. Anyway, I should let you get back to your ship. I'm sure you have many more worlds to evaluate. Thank you for your time. This has been extremely educational. She turned to walk away, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. Oh, one last thing. That rating you gave us? The 4.2. I've been running my own evaluation this whole time. Observing your team, your methods, your criteria, your biases. I thought you'd want to know. You've been evaluating us? Plick sputtered. Of course, Vera said, and her smile finally reached her eyes. That's what anthropologists do. We study other cultures, assess their values, understand their limitations. You're quite fascinating, really. And? Morwen demanded. What's your assessment? Vera tilted her head, considering. Well, by my standards, I'd rate your team about a 3.6. You're technologically stagnant, relying on frameworks that haven't meaningfully improved in centuries. Your social cohesion appears based primarily on shared superiority complexes. Your resource management is adequate but unimaginative. And your cultural sophistication, well, you just spent 2 hours completely missing the point of everything we showed you. She waved cheerfully. But hey, that's just one human's opinion. Safe travels. And she walked away, leaving 4 highly advanced alien evaluators standing in stunned silence. Cerex was the first to speak. Did she just rate us lower than we rated them? I finished. Yes. Yes, she did. We stood there for another full minute before Morwen said quietly, perhaps we should review the quantum entanglement research before we leave. That's exactly what we did. And that's when everything started to get really complicated. So there we were, for supposedly superior beings, huddled in our ship's conference room at 2 in the morning, Earth time, reading through human scientific papers like students cramming for an exam we'd already failed. The quantum entanglement communication theory was real. Very real. And it worked, at least on paper, in ways that made our chief physicist send 3 consecutive messages consisting entirely of symbols that I'm pretty sure violated communications protocol. The FTL improvements were equally legitimate, utilizing mathematical frameworks our scientists had dismissed as computational dead ends approximately 600 years ago. Turns out, dead ends look different when you approach them from another angle. This is problematic, Sarek said, which was his species' way of saying we'd monumentally screwed up. Plix was frantically cross-referencing his 17 doctorates against the human research. The mathematics are sound. Unorthodox, but sound. How did a 4.2 civilization develop this? Maybe, I suggested carefully, they're not actually a 4.2 civilization. Morwen's tendrils coiled in agitation. Our assessment criteria are standardized and objective. Our assessment criteria measure what we decided matters, I countered. Dr. Park made a valid point. We're measuring everyone against standards we created based on our own development patterns. That's how evaluation works, Plix insisted. Is it though? I pulled up Earth's file on my datapad. Look at this. We marked them down for political fragmentation, right? Multiple nations, constant disagreement, inefficient decision-making. But what if that fragmentation drives innovation? Competition between groups, different approaches to problems, diversity of thought. Chaos drives nothing but more chaos, Morwen said firmly. Does it? Our own civilizations, we're all unified. Single governments, standardized thinking, consensus-based progress. When was the last time any council species made a breakthrough discovery? Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. Sarek finally spoke. The Eularian drive was invented 412 years ago. Before that, the Nexus communication array, 607 years ago. And humans have been technologically active for what, 200 years? I let that sink in. They've gone from basic flight to space stations, from mechanical computation to artificial intelligence, from splitting the atom to theoretical quantum communication. All while fighting with each other, polluting their planet, and operating under what we called catastrophically inefficient systems. We need to speak with Dr. Park again, Morwen said quietly. Finding her wasn't difficult. Humans are delightfully trackable, given their attachment to communication devices. She was at a bar 3 blocks from the United Nations building, drinking something amber-colored and talking with 2 other humans. We materialized outside, which caused the usual screaming and phone camera situation, and walked in. Well, Plix rolled in. Morwen floated. You get the idea. Vera looked up from her drink, utterly unsurprised. Back already? That was quick. We reviewed your research, I said. And? It's impressive, Sarek admitted, the words clearly causing him physical pain. Thank you. Vera took a sip of her drink. Though I should mention, I'm not a physicist. I just read their papers. You want impressive, talk to the people actually doing the work. We would like to do that, Morwen said. We may have been hasty in our initial assessment. Vera laughed. Actually laughed. May have been. You gave us a 4.2 and told us we were developmentally delayed. Then you were about to leave and forget about us for 50 years while we presumably either blow ourselves up or stagnate into irrelevance. Standard protocol for monitored species, Plix said defensively. Right. Here's the thing though. Vera set down her glass. You're not the first aliens to show up here. Everything stopped. Time, motion, my respiratory systems. Excuse me. I managed. Oh, you're the first official evaluation team, Vera clarified. But we've had 3 other species make contact over the last 60 years. Quiet contact. Unofficial. They wanted to trade technology, resources, information. We've been learning a lot. That's against council regulations, Morwen sputtered. Uncontacted species are protected from interference until official evaluation. Protected, Vera repeated. Interesting word choice. From where I'm sitting, it looks more like gatekeeping. You control who gets access to galactic civilization, which means you control the flow of information, technology, trade. Very convenient for established powers. My primary brain was spinning. Which species made contact? I'm not telling you that, Vera said simply. They asked for discretion, we're providing it. But I will say they've found humanity quite valuable as a partner. Our different perspective on problems, our unconventional approaches, our willingness to try things that seem impossible. Turns out, being rated low by your standards doesn't mean we're actually inferior. It just means we're different. This changes everything, Sarek said. Does it? Vera leaned back. You're going to go back to your council and report what exactly? That you found a species that doesn't fit your evaluation model? That your standardized criteria might be flawed? That you've potentially been overlooking or dismissing valuable civilizations for 3,000 years? We have protocols, Morwen began. You have biases, Vera interrupted. Look, I'm not saying you're bad at your jobs. You're excellent at identifying species similar to yourselves. But you're terrible at recognizing value in species that develop differently. That's not malice, it's just limited perspective. One of the humans sitting with Vera, a woman with short dark hair, spoke up. Dr. Park has been trying to make this point to our own leaders for years. We do the same thing. Judge other cultures by our standards, dismiss what we don't understand. This is Dr. Lisa Huang, Vera introduced. Sociologist. And this is Dr. Robert Mills, xenobiology specialist. We don't actually have any alien biology to study yet, Robert said cheerfully, but I figured I'd get the degree ready for when we did. Looks like my timing was good. You planned for this, I said slowly. We hoped for this, Vera corrected. First contact was always a when, not if, question. We wanted to be ready. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect the official evaluation to go quite so poorly. 4.2 is not poorly, Plix protested weakly. 4.2 is failing, Lisa said. By any educational standard, that's an F. You looked at humanity and decided we weren't worth your time. But we came back, Sarek pointed out. Only because I made you curious, Vera said. If I'd just sat there looking impressed like everyone else, you'd be halfway to your next assignment by now. So here's my question for you all. What happens next? Good question. Fantastic question. I had no idea. We could file an amended report, I suggested. Highlight the theoretical research, recommend immediate re-evaluation. That would take approximately 15 years to process through council bureaucracy, Morwen said. Minimum. Or, Vera said carefully, you could skip the bureaucracy. Skip it how? I asked, though I suspected I knew. Your evaluators. You have authority to make initial contact and establish preliminary relations, correct? Nothing in council law prevents you from setting up cultural exchange programs, research partnerships, diplomatic channels. You just can't grant full membership without approval. She was right. Technically, frustratingly right. You've researched council law, Morwen observed. I researched everything I could find about you, Vera said. Public records, legal frameworks, historical precedents. You make a lot of information available, probably because you assume primitive species won't understand it or won't bother looking. And what did you find? Sarek asked. Vera smiled. Loopholes. Lots and lots of loopholes. For example, nothing prevents council members from engaging in independent research collaborations with monitored species, as long as it doesn't involve restricted technology transfers. Nothing prevents cultural exchange programs. Nothing prevents establishing communication protocols for future official contact. You want us to establish backdoor relations, I said. I want you to do what makes sense, Vera countered. You've seen our research. You know we have value. The question is whether you're willing to work outside your comfortable standardized system to access that value. Robert leaned forward. Plus, think about it from a practical standpoint. If other species are already making contact, Earth is going to develop relationships with somebody. Wouldn't the Council prefer those relationships include them? Smart. Annoyingly smart. Plix's crystalline structure was refracting light in patterns I'd learned indicated deep thought. The quantum communication research alone would be worth a collaborative program. If we could reduce communication lag across the Council network, the efficiency improvements would be substantial. And the FTL enhancements, Serix added reluctantly. 3-day transit versus 3-week transit changes everything about logistics, trade, emergency response. Morwen was quiet, her tendrils moving in complex patterns. Finally, she spoke. This would be unprecedented. We've never established this kind of relationship with a species rated below 6. Maybe it's time to set a new precedent, I said. Maybe, Morwen agreed slowly. But we need assurances. If we're going to advocate for this within the Council, we need to know humanity is genuinely interested in partnership, not just exploitation. We're interested in mutual benefit, Vera said. You give us access to galactic knowledge, cultural exchange, broader perspectives. We give you fresh approaches to old problems, unconventional solutions, and apparently some interesting physics. And the species that already contacted you? I pressed. That's their business and ours, Vera said firmly. But I'll tell you this much. Those relationships have been good for both sides. We've learned, they've learned, nobody's been exploited or manipulated. It can work. Lisa pulled out a tablet. We've actually drafted a proposal for a cultural and scientific exchange program. Obviously pending your approval and whatever Council processes you need to follow. But we thought having a framework ready might help. She slid the tablet across the table. I picked it up, started reading, and felt my plates retract further with each paragraph. It was comprehensive. Detailed. Professional. Addressed concerns I hadn't even thought of yet. You really did plan for this, Serix said, reading over my shoulder. We're a 4.2 civilization, Robert said with a grin. We have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. I looked at my team. Plix was still calculating something on his datapad, but he wasn't objecting. Serix was reading the proposal with what I'd learned to recognize as approval. Morwen's tendrils had relaxed into neutral configuration. This is going to be complicated, I said finally. The Council doesn't like exceptions to protocol. Good thing humanity specializes in complicated, Vera said. And exceptions to protocol, Lisa added. We'll need to establish trial programs first, Morwen said. Small-scale collaborations, limited information exchange, carefully monitored progress. We can work with that, Vera agreed. And we'll need regular assessments, Plix added. Verify that the partnership is productive for both sides. As long as we get to assess you too, Vera said with that smile again. Fair enough, I conceded. We spent the next 4 hours hammering out preliminary agreements. Communication protocols, research sharing frameworks, cultural exchange parameters. It was exhausting and exhilarating and completely outside my job description. As Earth's sun started rising, Morwen finally stood. We have enough to bring to the Council. This will take time, significant time, but I believe we can make a case for pilot programs. How long? Robert asked. Months, possibly years, Serix said. Council bureaucracy moves slowly. Then I guess it's good we're patient, Vera said, though her expression suggested she wasn't patient at all. In the meantime, we'll keep working on our primitive little theories and technologies. And we'll be watching, I said. Not monitoring. Watching. There's a difference. There is, Vera agreed. She stood, extended her hand. I'd learned this was a human gesture of agreement. I clasped it carefully with my manipulator tendril. Thank you for coming back. For being willing to reconsider. Thank you for making us, I said honestly. As we prepared to leave, Plix turned back. Out of curiosity, Dr. Park, what was your actual assessment of our team? You said 3.6, but was that accurate or were you just making a point? Vera considered the question seriously. Honestly? I'd rate you about a 6. You're good at what you've been trained to do, you follow established protocols effectively, and you're capable of recognizing when you're wrong. That's better than average. But you lack flexibility, you're overly reliant on standardized thinking, and you almost missed something valuable because it didn't fit your preconceptions. You've got room for improvement. Fair assessment, Morwen said. Though, Vera added, you came back when you realized your mistake. You listened to new information. You're willing to try something different. That bumps you up in my book. Maybe a 7. Still below your rating of us, I pointed out. Well, Vera said, grinning, we did figure out quantum entanglement communication while you've been using the same FTL drives for centuries. Have to count for something. We left Earth's orbit an hour later, our ship's databanks full of human research papers, cultural files, and preliminary partnership proposals. The trip back to Council headquarters would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to figure out how to explain that we'd found a species that broke every assumption we had about civilization development. 3 weeks to figure out how to tell the Council that maybe, just maybe, we've been doing evaluations wrong for 3,000 years. This is going to be a disaster, Plix said as we entered FTL. Probably, I agreed. The Council will resist changing established protocols, Sarix added. Definitely, Morwen confirmed. But we're doing it anyway, I said. We are, Morwen agreed. Because Dr. Park was right. We've been measuring everyone by our standards and missing value in the process. That needs to change. Also, Plix added grudgingly, those humans might actually solve FTL communication before we do, and I'd rather be partners when that happens than competitors. Fair point. I pulled up the final message Vera had sent as we departed. Just 3 words. See you soon. Not if, not maybe. Soon. The absolute confidence of a species we'd rated 4.2. I found myself looking forward to it. Turns out, being graded by someone else gives you perspective on your own grading system. And humanity, for all their fragmentation and chaos and primitive technology, had just taught 4 advanced species a lesson in humility. The real question was whether the rest of the Council was ready to learn it. I suspected we were about to find out. And I suspected humanity wasn't going to wait politely for our answer. Something told me the next evaluation would go very differently. Assuming we were still the ones doing the evaluating.